All right, very good. So I think as I'm starting to see some more participants roll in, I say we go ahead and just get started, depending upon maybe the amount of discussion we might have today. So certainly, first of all, thank you all for joining us today, for those of you that are participating and those of you that are attending. My name is Brian Furler. I work on the strategic partnership team at GradLeaders, along with Heather Crumpack and Amy King, who are also here today helping us kind of feed through hopefully a lot of the great questions that are going to come in that you all will be asking everyone today. You know, since everything was kind of crazy within this past year, within 2020, I'm sure you've had lots of conversations that have gone on this past year about what's going to happen with all the virtual events. What are some of the best practices around virtual events? What works well? What doesn't work well? What should we start doing? What should we stop doing? What do we keep doing? There's lots of different topics that we've all been asked these questions, at least on the strategic partnership team. A lot of our customers have provided some great feedback as well, but we thought this would be a great opportunity for questions to be asked amongst our experts here. So I think with that, then let's just sort of dive in. The strategy that we're going to try to plan today and follow is that feel free to throw all of your questions into the chat box, and I'll try to do my best to help moderate all those questions along with Heather and Amy. And then we do have a sort of agenda that we're going to follow through today, talking about different ideas of registration, pricing, timing of events, the different sizes of events, what works well, what doesn't work well. And then hopefully we'll get through all the questions. If we don't, we are recording this and we will compile the questions and answers, and we're happy to share those probably a few days after the event as well with everybody. So I think without further ado, let me introduce our panelists that we have here today. We have Mary Willis, who's the Interim Director of Career Development Center at Fresno State University. We also have Todd Reeves, the Director of Engineering Professional Practice at the University of Tennessee. We have Sean Strachan, the Global University Talent and Programs Manager at Envista Holdings. And last but not least, we have Cindy Loggins, the Global Head of University Recruiting and Programs at eBay. So thank you all very much for joining us. And I think to get us started, I was hoping maybe you all would just give maybe a few minutes here to talk about where you work, the size of events that you host, or the size of events that you end up attending to recruit students, and basically what your realm of virtual events looks like. So I think, Mary, if you don't mind, I'll start with you, if you don't mind taking a few minutes.
Sure. Again, my name's Mary Willis. I'm the Interim Director of the Career Development Center at California State University, Fresno, affectionately known by many as Fresno State. And we have a student population of about 25,000 students, many of whom upon graduation stay in the Central Valley of California. About 80 to 85% of our students stay in our region. We have reported, based on what's been reported, and 70% of our students are first gen. We are an HSI and an ANAPESI institution. I think we're well over 50%, I think we're 56, 57% Hispanic. And our career center is, it's centralized. So we have what I would call a hub and spoke model, where our career counselors actually are assigned to different colleges within the university. We have 8 colleges within our university. And they are the specialists for those areas. We also have an employer relations specialist. My day job is the university internship coordinator. So I work with all the academic programs, the faculty, students, and then employers in terms of connecting our students to those opportunities. We obviously are a 4-year institution, but we also have master's programs and EDD and PhD programs, which is somewhat unique for the CSU. So that's a little bit about us.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Mary. Todd, if you don't mind, I'll jump to you.
Okay, sure. So I'm Todd Reeves. I'm the director of the Office of Engineering Professional Practice, as Brian mentioned. So that office lives completely within the Tickle College of Engineering at the University of Tennessee. We are in our Knoxville campus, which is the flagship campus for the state's land grant institution. Obviously, the university, I should say obviously, but the university has been around since the 1790s. So one of the oldest institutions in the country, certainly. So our office is dedicated primarily to the co-op and internship program for our College of Engineering students. Our office began in 1926. So again, also one of the oldest engineering cooperative education programs in the country, the second oldest program in the South behind Georgia Tech, which was ahead of us by 7, 8 years, 6, 7, 8 years, something like that. So I've been in my role for, I guess, 11 years, actually in my 12th year now, which is kind of hard to believe. Background before that is mechanical engineering, project management, software development, and some other things. Started off kind of in more of an engineering career role, finished in more of an industry, in more of a product management, kind of marketing, business development role, and then transitioned to the University of Tennessee in 2010 in this role as director of the Engineering Professional Practice program. So we have around 5,000, 5,500 some odd total students in the Tickle College of Engineering, probably around 4,000 undergrads, and then 1,500 graduate students. There are 7 departments, 11, 12 different engineering majors, certainly all of the the key majors you would anticipate in a large college of engineering. The university itself has 28,000 students in the Knoxville campus, and then in the UT system, there's UT Chattanooga, UT, which is in south of us on the Georgia border, and then UT Martin, which is in upper West Tennessee, again, close to Kentucky and Missouri. And then we have a health science center in Memphis, Tennessee, which again is in the lower southwest corner of the state on the Mississippi River there in Memphis. So the campus system is distributed, and again, most all the things that our office engages with, centers around the Knoxville campus and the Tickle College of Engineering.
Perfect, thank you. All over the state of Tennessee.
That's right.
That's right. All right, Sean, if you don't mind, let me jump over to you and maybe talk about a little bit about Envista and then the role of recruiting that you have there.
Hi, everyone. I am the programs manager and talent for university at Envista. I've been there for a little over 1.5 years, and prior to that, coming from pharmaceuticals and then hospitality before that, always in the university recruitment kind of hemisphere. And so primarily recruiting for what we call our general management development program, which is a 6-year program designed to get MBA students through the program, rotating in different areas of the company, and then coming out as a vice president or general manager. We also have an internship that feeds into that as well. And then hopefully in the next year or so, rolling out an undergraduate program as well. We are a dental company, and we're based out of Brea, California, with offices around the world as well. And we have about 12 to 13,000 employees with us, and we're relatively, I would say, it's small for me coming from other companies, but relatively small from a UR piece as well. So our programs are about 5 to 7 individuals going to the programs each cycle every year. And then as we grow to be a bigger company through acquisitions, then we'll go ahead and increase that size.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And Cindy with eBay, with a perfect background. I like yours a lot better than mine with a cat in the background, but if you don't mind kind of sharing us a little bit about you and eBay.
Thanks, Brian. I appreciate it. Yes, my background is crazy. I work out of the garage. We've been at home since March of last year, so getting myself comfortable. Thanks for having me today. I work for eBay out here in San Jose, California. You'd think it's warm, but it's actually not for us Californians today. So I've got my puffy jacket on in the garage without insulation. I have been doing university recruiting for many more years than I can probably count at this point, and absolutely love it. Started my career out as a coordinator and now have the opportunity to lead a small but mighty team. At eBay, we recruit anything from undergraduates all the way to PhDs, including MBAs. Majority of our roles tend to be engineering with a dabble in product management and some operations and strategy roles as well.
Okay, perfect. Yes, thank you so much for sharing that. So certainly, as Cindy kind of alluded, we've been in this scenario since last March, right? And everything's gone virtual. A lot of virtual events, no more travel, that kind of went out the window, of course. So I think let's start talking about virtual events, and a lot of our attendees, certainly please start throwing in some questions. But maybe if we want to start talking about how has the level of engagement maybe changed with virtual events? Like, do you all feel engagement, employer registration still seem about normal as they used to? From the corporate side, do student interactions still seem on par with what you're used to in this virtual environment?
I can go ahead and answer that from our perspective. So normally our office hosts a fairly large, in-person recruiting event in the fall and the spring. We call it the Engineering Expo. We've kind of worked hard to kind of keep that event branded as an expo. And so we had steadily seen an increase in employer and student attendance really over the past 10 years. And so when I started, we had on the order of 30, 40 companies at the expo, 200, 300 students at the expo. And then it culminated in the fall of 2019 with like 108 companies at the expo and over 1,000 students. And then in the fall of 2020, right before the pandemic, again, we had 103 companies at our spring expo and 970 students. So we hit the pinnacle, and then the pandemic, and then we were virtual in the fall. And so then we had about 83 companies at our fall expo, and only about 600 students participated there. The drop off from employers, I think, is related more to just the uncertainty of the pandemic, reduced hiring, reduced positions, and that sort of thing. It is a little harder to engage students in an outreach, outreach to students. A co-op and internship are certainly voluntary. And so part of what we do in our office continually is reach out to students, classroom presentations, events in the engineering courtyard, a number of things to generate interest in the program and the opportunities. And so I think that's, again, just being able to connect with students. Otherwise, things are, seem to be going pretty well. We've got our spring expo coming up in a few weeks. And again, the employer attendance, we're still adding employers. We'll be maybe around 70 employers for the spring, which again is probably on par considering we had 83 in the fall. But anyway, I think that's the general response to the questions that you asked, Brian. If I'm left something out, remind me, please.
Absolutely. And Sean, I think you were maybe about to comment as well.
Yeah, for our events, obviously quick pivot to virtual, but I think we've actually seen an increase in students attend the events that we're hosting. I mean, it's going to be your typical events like the company briefings, the lunch and learns, et cetera. But we've been trying to do also more one-on-one interactions just to get that interpersonal relationship built. Usually when you're on campus, you're talking to them one-on-one. To kind of have that rapport there and get that going. And it's a little bit harder with the virtual screen, which we've realized as well during our first virtual internships last year. So trying to get that established and do some more one-on-ones and casual type conversations with individuals that have graduated within the past, year, 2, 3 years, and then kind of getting them network with senior leaders as well. It's also been actually easier in terms of getting more people to participate in the events because they're not traveling and whatnot. So the time-wise, it's been a lifesaver to get more senior leaders involved and get more of that interaction. So I think there's been some positives there as well for us.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, I mean, certainly not taking the travel component out, right? Saves time and money for all involved. Yeah. Yes, Mary.
I was going to share, and I don't have the lovely hard numbers that Todd had handy, but overall, We as well host 2 large events in the fall and the spring, with anywhere from 150 to 250 employers. This year, we pivoted, obviously, which is, I guess, a pandemic word now is pivot. To virtual, and we saw a significant decrease in employer participation. Granted, we went to 3 virtual fairs in the fall. And I think our students weren't ready to interact with employers. So we had a significant decrease in the number of student participants. We just had, it wasn't our event, it was put on by our College of Agriculture, but we helped facilitate it since we own the GradLeaders license. A career fair just a week ago today, and we saw better student sign up, although the day of. So about 42% of all their slots were filled, where it was much less in the fall. So I think students are starting to get more comfortable with this. And I know we'll get into it a little bit later, but also I think the platform improvements to the 2.0 has helped also significantly in students being able to access it. Interesting feedback from employers, though. Some like this, some can't wait to get back on campus. We had problems, which we'll talk about, I'm sure. We had them in person too, that folks would, employers would leave early and students would still be trying to sign up. We had that in person too, and we get it. But that still was happening in this last fair that we had. So we've got some things to work on in terms of helping our employers succeed at this thing.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, like you said, right? The whole pivot scenario, something different that probably students weren't quite accustomed to yet, even though they are pretty accustomed to technology. Something different in play. Absolutely. Perfect. All right.
I was going to say, Brian, if I could just add really quickly to that. We hated the online events, the career fairs. We actually, as we were scoping out our fall season last year, we looked at our target universities and tried to figure out, what type of interaction we could have with that. And what was really challenging on our part was pretty much every school operated on a different platform. So that meant that my team had to understand the nuances on how to get in, where do we go, are we an avatar, are we not, how do we interact with students, are they queued in, are they not, is everybody in a room, do we do presentations, do we not? It just got really confusing for us. And then if it became confusing for us, it was pretty much impossible for the folks that we brought from the business, because again, to get them to look at, different candidates. So we very quickly, to Mary's point, pivoted the opposite way and ended up doing no career fairs, no virtual career fairs. We posted our positions. We attended larger conferences to be able to continue to get our brand out there. And then what we tried to do is for niche positions that we had, we actually held sessions that we advertised, whether through student clubs or organizations at schools, or the larger chapter or the national organizations, and held sessions that way, and seemed to get a lot more traction because we could personalize it. And we'd say, if you are interested in an iOS or an Android position on the engineering side, come hear from our leaders and some of our engineers. And the question, they had really good questions, and it allows us from a registration perspective to get candidates and funnel them that way. So for us, from an employer standpoint, I don't think it's anything that the schools are or not doing. It was challenging across the board to try and navigate how best to continue to attract students from specific schools. And then the flip side to all of that, which I really loved, is I had a very strategic these are my, target schools, these are maybe my niche schools, and maybe these are my conferences. With us being virtual now, the outreach ability is huge. I can now go after so many more students because I don't have to have my stilettos on the ground or my team's boots on the ground as well. So we kind of benefited from as well, I think, similar to Sean, coming out of it. And it'd be interesting to see what we do this next year.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, because, certainly with all the different technologies and tools, I can understand what you're saying. They're a lot different, right? And so what is the best practice for all of this? So, I mean, Cindy, you kind of alluded to a little bit about next year. I mean, we get that question a lot internally at GradLeaders from our partner schools and thinking, well, what are they going to be planning to do in the next year, 2 years? Is this now the norm, or will it be some kind of a hybrid mix? I mean, do you have a feeling on that thought? If you can predict.
I have lots of feelings on that. Probably none of them being relevant to this conversation. With that said, my team will not be on campus in the fall, probably not this next academic year. As a company, we're still trying to figure out how do we all go back to work in a safe and productive manner. And so as the company continues to do that, from a global perspective, and every region is a little bit different, we're going to try and focus on virtual engagements in the fall as well. And it'll, just depend. We may not look at it by school anymore, but we may just look at it by region, the West Coast, and let's advertise it to a bunch of schools across the board, like everybody else. DNI is super important to us. So advertising to student organizations within each of your realms as well. We are looking, if we were to go back at some point, so let's say 2 years down the road when things have hopefully settled down a little bit, I don't know that the career fairs are going to be for us anymore. I would like to see, my team engage a little bit more in smaller, more intimate settings, those that are interested in specific roles. So, Todd and his engineering group, maybe it's specific presentations to certain groups within there. We luck out from a perspective that our brand is predominantly well-known. And so I'm grateful for that. I think for us, it's just diving down a little bit deeper and saying, okay, within that brand, if you're interested in A, B, or C, let's engage, let's get you in front of teams that are looking for, students like you and our professors to say, what are you teaching? This is what we're doing. What are you teaching? And how do we meet in the middle to make sure that we want to consider your students as candidates?
Sure. Okay, absolutely. And Sean, I know you might be really good at predicting the future. If you can, let me know your lotto numbers. But what do you think might be the future? Let's say, like Cindy was saying, like a year or 2 years down the road.
Yeah, definitely still working on those numbers. But in terms of going back in the fall, I think we're going to just assess it as it comes closer. Would we love to be there? Yes, but we also want to make sure that we're in a safe environment. And obviously, we'll follow what schools dictate as well in terms of those that we do visit on campus. So a lot of it will depend on their policies and then also what our company kind of overall viewpoint is. We're also not back in the office. The only ones back in the office are really our manufacturing facilities from a US standpoint. So depending on what that kind of sentiment is as we get closer, I think we'll make a game time decision enough to kind of give us a good kind of maybe a month, 2 months to prepare in terms of suiting up the teams and making sure that they feel comfortable as well, kind of going to the schools that are going to be representing us. So I think a lot will go into that, and it'll be interesting to see what we do. And I could see it more of a hybrid approach for this year. And then maybe, again, the following year, it'd be more directly in-person type.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, absolutely. And you all might share the same sentiment as myself in that it would be great to get out of this room and not be in one place all the time. Yeah, I get a little bit of that same room fatigue. Perfect. So I know a couple of you sort of mentioned this topic as well about, it being such a different process per school. And again, this is another question we get a lot, is that are students queuing on a one-off basis when I meet with students in a virtual career fair or event, or is it better to have students in a time slot? What do you all think might be the best process? And Mary and Todd might be able to speak from how students feel, but certainly Sean and Cindy, is there a method to everybody doing the same thing, one process that works better?
Granted, we are just throwing things out there and seeing what sticks, to be perfectly honest. So each event is a learning thing. In fact, conveniently, we just had our debrief on the fair that was on Wednesday. We had that yesterday to talk about what we need to do for our large fair that's March 3rd. So a couple of things that we are contemplating. We're offering employers the opportunity to schedule a 30-minute info session at some point during the fair. We're trying to stagger that so similar industries won't be competing for students' attention during that time. And then we found that 10 minutes is not enough to have a conversation. We bumped it to 15, and we're putting a 5-minute break in between each of those slots because people are like, oh my goodness, you're killing me. Next fall, to be honest, what we're looking at is, again, 3 virtual fairs. We may move it to a 2-day type of event for each fair. They'll be industry specific. They will be virtual, but 2 days, 1 day being just information sessions if employers want to participate in those. And then individual appointments for the second day. And then we'll have a kind of catch-all in-person fair, provided that we're allowed to be on campus. Word on the street, at least from our chancellor's office, is that we will be back in August, and at 70% capacity. But I, again, don't know what that means for large gatherings. So we're covering all our bases.
Right, exactly.
So what we're looking for in the fall, and again, I have not heard the first thing about what University of Tennessee is going to do for the fall. Imagine at the very least, we'll still be doing what we're doing now, which is a mixture of hybrid online classes, in-person classes, and hybrid. Certainly the hope is that we're migrating towards more in-person things coming in the fall. As far as our engineering expo, again, provided the university will allow events, then we will likely have some type of an in-person event and then follow that up with some virtual events, probably either, Expo Day 2 that's virtual, or we may look at doing some smaller kind of engineering major specific events. So something, a specific virtual event for the civil engineering students and a virtual event for electrical engineering and computer science students and employers that are recruiting those majors only. So that may be a path. And as we've talked about the transition from in-person to virtual, and then from the virtual 1.0 solution with GradLeaders to the virtual 2.0 solution, and the procurement of that upgraded module. The idea is, now that we've got this module, how might we be able to kind of leverage that and continue to use that into the future, apart from, if we had a full in-person event the way we used to always do it, might there still be a mechanism or a use or a benefit to some smaller niche events that are virtual?
Yeah, kind of back to what Mary said as well. Just the 5 minutes was definitely not long enough in terms of those conversations. And I think it was, still getting used to kind of what makes sense out there and what works, doesn't work. And so we've done the 5, we've done the 10, and I think 15 could be that right number. Again, with having that break in between, allowing you to still see people, maybe, obviously kind of pre-screening them if it allows for that in terms of those that would match your job or what you were looking for. And obviously you're kind of putting out there what you're looking for as well, so they know who you are as a company, but also what positions you're offering. So it's more meaningful candidates that you're having these conversations with. and trying to maximize as best you can. I mean, while the 5 minutes was nice because you could see so many people, the conversations just weren't in terms of getting to know the individual and being able to answer their questions. So understood the kind of motive behind that, but definitely I think the longer time will allow for more meaningful conversations and connections going forward. So I think those are kind of what we're interested in. I think having those kind of time slots are really nice, but we'll do a mixture of different things where we have a smaller size group. I definitely nothing too large. We've had a lot of kind of hiccups in the fall in terms of technology and kind of breakout rooms and stuff like that. So there's just a lot of lag behind time. So by the time you got everyone in the room and you were kind of ready to talk on the topic, you had like 10 minutes left and it just wasn't doable. So again, still a learning curve and seeing what makes sense. And I know from a company perspective, we're willing to kind of try anything out that makes sense to us. Clubs have kind of brought new ideas to us. They've, talked about virtual escape rooms and kind of little social happy hours with people. So we didn't take part in the escape room, so I'm not sure how that works exactly, but thinking about new ideas to try and kind of gauge the attention because I know everyone has that Zoom fatigue.
Yep, absolutely.
Hey,
Yeah, so just kind of think about 5 minutes too. That does go by really fast, even thinking that we're already over half our time here.
Right.
Just enough time for like an elevator pitch, right? And then you're in and out.
One of the things I wanted to kind of come back to, Sean made me think that I didn't answer this question the first time about the time slots. So we're using 10-minute time slots. We're having students sign up for those ahead of time. Each employer has their own virtual room or multiple rooms, and students will sign up for those. And it's multiple recruiters can be in the time slot, but only one student can be in the time slot. So 10 minutes seems to work okay for that. We have had students ask for a break in between, but we're probably not going to do that for the spring. But we're using 10-minute time slots where students sign up ahead of time. We open that up a week before our expo to let them sign up. We're also doing we do an interview day. We used to do that in person, and we're still doing that virtually as well with the interviews the day after or 2 days after. And so that works really well also for us.
There's one technology we used as well. I can't remember what it was. It was for a conference, and there wasn't kind of pre-identified time slots that I can remember, but you had a conversation with a student and maybe it automatically kind of put you in a 10-minute bubble. There was an option to kind of extend your time, an extra 10 minutes kind of thing before it shut off. So that was also nice to kind of be able to say, I want more time with the student.
Perfect. Yep. And Sean and Cindy, I mean, Mary and Todd have both sort of alluded to the 1.0 and 2.0 that GradLeaders provides. The 2.0, just really quickly, basically allows no time slots, but you can queue students. So you can pull students into your virtual booth, speak with them, and then move on to the next one. We have been talking time slots, but just out of a quick question, maybe a little selfish question, is what do you all think about that queuing process? Do you think that would work well?
We had only a couple of employers want that. Also, with students who signed up day of, one of the things we apparently, and I tested it because I'm in the system so many different ways. I've got a company, I'm an admin, and I'm a student and an alum. So I live in a lot of different portions of the database. So I would sign up to meet with an employer, and then I'd go back and see from the employer perspective what that queue looked like, or did I show up in their list. And so we're still having a little bit of a challenge with, we're going to have to remind employers that they've got to keep hitting the refresh on their screen because it's not popping up. So some students signed up and then the employer thought they didn't have anybody. And the students sometimes will sign up 5 minutes before the slot. So that would be the only challenge. I'd like to see the queue work, but again, a lot of employers preferred the slot as opposed to the queue.
Okay.
Yeah, we're not going to use the queuing for our spring expo. And again, part of it's just the thought of, 500 to 700 students trying to connect with, 70, 80 companies all at once could be troubling. I do think for some of the smaller events we're envisioning for either later this spring or in the fall, kind of an engineering major specific event, I think the queuing would be really a perfect way to go, where you've got an event with, just civil engineering students and maybe, 15, 20 employers that are participating, and then students can just, kind of queue up as they go. So I do envision using that there in that mechanism or that manner. But for our big events, the idea is signing up for time slots ahead of time. And the fact is students can still sign up for a time slot the day of, or the, 5 minutes before. They can look for an open time slot and get in it. So that works very well.
Yeah, and Sean and Cindy, maybe how do you all feel being on the corporate employer recruitment side, sort of taking students as they were just, as they would like a real physical booth, sort of walk up to your table, but it's in a virtual realm?
I think for us, well, so right, the full disclosure there, we didn't participate in many of the virtual career fairs this past year. I think the queuing thing sounds interesting to me. I think for us, we typically have really long queues. And so talk about fatigue on both sides, right? You have students that are waiting in our queue. Does that mean that they can't be in Sean's queue, right? And how does that play out? You think about a physical career fair, you might have somebody in our queue for possibly an hour if the line is super long. How does that facilitate? The other thing is that because our volume ends up being pretty long as well, even if it's a 2-hour career fair virtually, I don't know that our engineers and our MBA managers are going to want to be online for that long. So that becomes our problem. And I think for us, when we think about trying to get information out to a broader group of students, sort of a one-stop shop, we tend to like to do more info sessions. I think Mary had alluded to some of that too. Info sessions are specific to certain groups of students, so we can get the information, engage, and it becomes more of a back and forth conversation versus an interview. And then we leave the interview, the actual individual engagement through the interview process, which we do online anyway.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's nice to kind of have those queue times, only because then you're not sitting there and waiting for, to get into someone's booth. And again, I don't know how it works in terms of, can you, like Cindy alluded to, can you not sign up for someone else's booth if you're waiting in line? So you can sign up for multiple ones, that's great. But then if the employer accepts you from each one at the same time, then it's like, where do I go to? So
Yeah.
Not even sure how the logistics work on that, but I think that's something to consider there. Maybe if it was a little bit of a longer conference, maybe there's a main room that everyone can kind of enter in, and you're doing a presentation of, I don't know, a fancy tool or something that you're proud of with your company. And then, you sign up for times, or you have pre-signed up for times for specific one-on-one chats or something like that.
Okay, fantastic, absolutely. Certainly the way I know our tool is built, I don't know about a lot of others, but it is built in the fact that students can't optimize their time. So if they're talking with another employer, they can still be queued for others. And then it just keeps them in that same spot. So hopefully that maximizes everybody's time, certainly. So Heather from our student partnership team had mentioned that she does have a question from one of the participants that has come in. So yeah, Heather, if you please don't mind directing us towards that question.
Sure. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. This is Heather with GradLeaders. My question is actually for Sean and or Cindy, and it's kind of keeping with the keep, stop, start theme. And I was wondering if you had advice for all the folks on the call for their students, right? Whatever kind of virtual events that you've participated in, do you have any advice of whether students should either keep, stop, or start doing as we go into the spring and then fall events?
Yeah, that's a good question for us. We've tried to keep everything on the books as much as possible. We haven't done too many virtual career fairs. If we have, they've done more targeted. So knowing exactly the candidate profile we're going after for us, and then just more of those targeted events that are smaller in scope. And we, again, try to maintain a normal footprint for what we would do on campus. But we've also tried to be flexible in terms of those unique events that we could do and try to make it a little bit more fun, realizing it is a more informal atmosphere, and there's going to be interruptions, there's going to be pets, there's going to be kids, etc. Knowing that there's are level set expectations that, you have to kind of go through, and it is what it is working from home or wherever you might be, but try to keep as much as possible for us.
And Sean, as a follow-up, any specific things that you would tell students that they should be thinking about as these virtual events continue to make sure they're getting the most out of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think doing anything they can to maximize their time there and really doing the research on what they're actually looking for. So they're not wasting their time sitting through all these different, Zoom events or what have you, really making sure that, yes, this is the company I want. Maybe these are the top 3, top 4, and then this is the position I'm applying for, and this is the reason why. So really targeting their approach. We've had a mixture, I would say, of those that have targeted and those that were kind of really all over the board. And those conversations, they were really just lacking, the ones that were all over the board. And it didn't end up being a great use of time for us. I'm sure not themselves. And obviously we probably wouldn't have moved forward with them. So as long as I think they know what they want, they're more targeted, I think that kind of works a lot better. And, I think sometimes it's common sense, but sometimes it's not as well. So.
Thanks, Sean.
Add a couple of things to Sean's piece. I think as employers, a lot of the times my team, in a way, thinks that we're right and we're trying to educate the students. But what we've tried this last year is to say, what do the students want and how do they want to interact? If we're not going to the career fairs, how do they want to gain information from us? What is it that they want to know? So we've tried to flip the cards on ourselves a little bit. But there's a couple of things that I think about, Heather, from our messaging as eBay to students. And I echo what Sean's saying. Like, if you're signing up for one of our events, come prepared, come engaged, whatever that means for you. Video for us is super important. So what I would say, and I know every company is different and every individual is different. And so, if students are signing up for online events, and if it's a speaker session or want to look at what that company's speakers are doing, are they all on video or are they all, have solid pictures? A lot of the times for us, we typically start our presentations and say, we're so excited that you guys are all here. Thanks for giving us the opportunity. If you feel that you are in a safe environment, we'd love for you to turn your camera on, because we're missing the physical interaction piece, and this is how we do it. So we do call that out. And so if students are coming to eBay, right, one of the things is just make sure you're in the right place and you've got something on that's appropriate for whatever you're going to be participating in. So that's it for us. The other thing as well is, because companies like us aren't participating in a lot of the larger career event type sessions, go and figure out what types of companies you're interested in. Go to their websites, their external websites, and see if their events are posted, because that's what we ended up doing a lot too. And we had other marketing mechanisms, but we didn't go and post info sessions on our target schools because we had many. So we reverted to, let's see what we could get with posting on our internal side that showed exposure to students on our external careers website. And then the third piece is, when you sign up for an event, if you're signing up for a software engineering information session, make sure you're a software engineer. I love the fact that there's enthusiasm between students and people from all backgrounds attending. But it's a little discouraging and disheartening when you're attending a software event and say, hi, I'm Cindy, I'm an MBA student, I'm interested in a product marketing role that has nothing to do with the presentation. It gets noted from the leaders that are there presenting. So again, I think it's a little bit of the mix of the three. Hope that's helpful.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, so happy to take more questions as they come on. So feel free, any attendees, to keep asking questions. I think kind of flipping it just a little bit, some of the questions that I get in working with the customers on the school side is cost a hindrance to doing virtual events? And maybe this might be targeted more towards Sean and Cindy, like our virtual events, you're registering and paying for them much as you would as a career event. Does that provide any kind of a different scenario, thought process in deciding to do a virtual event?
For us, I mean, it really hasn't. I mean, I think the fees are pretty consistent with kind of what we're paying for and what we're getting. And I think all in all, it's pretty nominal fee. I think when you get to the larger conferences, that's when we kind of take a step back and look and say, all right, is it really worth the 50 to 75K plus that we're spending on it? Or do we curb that back a little bit this year, depending on what we're going to get? And that's kind of where we are. The on-school campus activities that you pay for, like info sessions or whatnot, that's fine for us. So
same for us. It's made me think a little bit differently, but not necessarily completely. And I'm going to throw Mary's word in there, pivoting my strategy from that perspective. I will say, again, because we didn't attend very many career fairs, $600-700, anywhere to $1,200-1,400 a career fair for me from a virtual perspective seems a little bit silly. But I also am cognizant that you all as schools are pivoting to different platforms, right? You're having to take what you had in person and find different vendors that you guys can partner with. So, I'm a little bit in the middle there. I would much prefer to donate money to student organizations within your school so that they can continue to do what they do. I would much rather donate money to scholarships to keep students in school and to keep them engaged, and for them to not lose confidence amidst chaos, right? And so I have shifted my thinking a little bit. But then again, to Sean's point, some of these larger events, I think those of us that recruit engineers, Grace Hopper is one of them, super costly, trying to figure out if the cost from a virtual perspective is relevant to the ROI we as a company might get.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate that honest feedback because, like I said, that is a question that we kind of commonly get: is are employers still interested in attending these events, and are they still, understanding that they might cost? And so certainly, I think Mary and Todd and all the attendees are probably happy to hear that they are taking on some cost with some virtual technologies to help facilitate all of this.
Yeah, and to be perfectly honest, we're having to rethink because our revenue. And we're an office, and I'm sure many of those here today are in the same boat. We're not fully funded at all. In terms of operation costs, we get enough to cover a couple of student assistants in our copy machine. And that's about it. Yes, we have staff, although that thing shrunk dramatically because of COVID. But we have to we have to have things like GradLeaders and all the things that we provide our students. We have to raise our money. And so, I want to give our employers a good ROI, like Cindy mentioned. So we have cut the cost of attendance at our fairs. But at the same time, we're realizing that we're gonna, the money that we have raised over the years to support our office will disappear soon if we keep going with this particular level of cost. So it's a real challenge. Part of the reason I'm probably glad right now I'm just interim, because I don't have to think about it for terribly long, but it concerns me. So but again, we're very cognizant of the return on investment and don't want to gouge you folks.
I think for us, we looked at that. We did reduce the registration fee associated with virtual events to a lower number than what we had for the in-person events. There is some cost savings when you're not ordering. We had our interview day, we provided lunch for everyone. But we're renting the basketball arena. There's parking we have to pay for. There's a number of physical expenses that go away with virtual. So we lowered the price, but it's still not free. So there's still expenses that we incur as an office with the virtual solution. And then we also looked across the landscape a little bit. Some other entities like the ASEE conferences, when they went from in-person to virtual, I think they were still charging around 65 or 70% of the in-person conference price for the virtual conference. So the idea that virtual would still be at kind of that, 50 to 75% of the in-person price seemed appropriate. And one of the things that I tried in the fall is, put an additional small price on like additional meeting rooms. So it's like you wanted, if an employer wanted, 2 meeting rooms, that was included. But if they wanted, 4, that was another $50 or something. And that spiraled out of control. So for the spring, reduced the overall price actually even more and went away from charging anything extra for anything. So it's just a flat rate up to 10 virtual meeting rooms, for the price. And that's been a lot smoother from my perspective as we've done it. And so we're still charging a little bit less.
Okay, perfect. No, I appreciate all that honest commentary. So I do have a question. Let me pivot over to the question really quick, and this might be directed at Mary about the point about students not being ready in the fall. What kind of recruiting opportunities are best available for the spring?
For us, I think again, students are getting more comfortable with this. What we found really interesting is our webinars. We were about to ditch workshops. We do a lot of classroom presentations to students, but getting them, and we bribe them with pizza. If you bake it, they will come, and they don't. They've got too much going on. But what I have found really interesting is that our attendance, now that we started doing webinars, has skyrocketed. So I think, the information session, making those available to employers to do, even going forward, I think they'll have better attendance if we do it as a webinar. Okay. Instead of dragging them to campus and trying to find a parking spot on our campus, which is a nightmare. Yeah, that's been really, and then we record them and they're on our YouTube channel, and we're seeing hits of students watching them at their convenience. So we've been really pleased with that. We do a lot of training ahead of time for students on how to navigate the fair. Our employer relations person does a fantastic job in creating these videos for our students. So I think it'll get better over time. One of the things we always try and stress to our employers is that our students are first generation, many of them. And so sometimes they're not as familiar with this whole process that maybe some other students are, and to extend a lot of grace to our students. There's 7 of us and we can't get to all 25,000 resumes. So extend grace and help them learn. And I know you're trying to get a good ROI on your time, but at the same time, we're focused on also teaching our students how to adult, to bottom line.
All the time, right, exactly. That is true. Very good. Appreciate that response. I think we're kind of coming down to the last few minutes here in the hour. I mean, we certainly appreciate all the candor and the honest commentary. So, I mean, from each of you, thinking about the virtual world, recruiting students and students going out into that virtual world, are any kind of big key things you want to leave open in this group of attendees here today, or anything you just want to speak out into the realm about virtual events? Feel free to use this as your platform.
I mean, honestly, for me, I think it's just been helpful with the open and honest kind of feedback after the different events, both from a student's perspective, but also career services in terms of what worked, what didn't work, what are you hearing, whether it's for our specific company or it's other companies, what's really kind of, what are these students actually interested in, and what are they getting the most ROI from, so we can pivot if needed, if it would fit what our company is looking for. But then also, yeah, we just want to make sure that at the end of the day, we're giving the students what they need. And obviously, securing individuals for our roles that we have to offer.
I think for us, the coolest thing about virtual, and we've certainly experienced this with some of the other virtual Zoom meetings and info sessions and things that we've done, where it's all of a sudden it's easy to have a recent alumni join a panel discussion, and they're sitting in Houston or they're in Orlando, and nobody had to travel to campus to participate. The same thing holds true for our expo and our recruiting events. Certainly, as you would imagine, we've got a core of employers that traditionally recruit from the University of Tennessee, but it provides the opportunity for folks that might be on the West Coast or on the North Midwest to say, hey, I've heard some good things about UT, and I probably would never fly down there and attend an event, but I can attend their event virtually. And so I think that probably opens up for a lot of us. And the other thing that we certainly like about our, GradLeaders solution and the way recruiting tends to happen is when people do come to our campus or when they post jobs in our system or register for our events, we know they're specifically targeting UT engineering students. So when you have other systems that maybe have jobs that are posted from all over the country, and you might as well be using Indeed or Monster.com. So students from UT are competing with students all over the country for those things. So GradLeaders and our events, that allows the companies that are recruiting to be specifically recruiting our students, and then students are really, again, they're competing with everybody all over the country anyway, but at least for that event, it's a little more tailored to those students. So that part of virtual is cool. So you can, and we've had some companies that we've not traditionally worked with that have joined us and are joining us virtually. So that's pretty cool.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, I love that.
I think for me is, just a call out that those of you on the side of education are doing a really good job. Like, don't be so hard on yourselves. Like, we're all in this together. I think, and I chuckle really at Mary's point about pivoting. Like, we all are just going to have to pivot. And so we as employers need to continue to be open with our partners on your guys' side. And vice versa, be open with us with what your students want. And I think Sean hit on this pretty hard too. Like, we want to be there for your students. So communicate to us what it is that your students need and want. And then we as employers are going to do our best to figure that out, because we do need you all there to be that conduit and continue to be that conduit for the students. So however that works for you, continue to do it, because we're going to get through this together.
And my last thought is, again, I don't think this form of communication, this virtual form of communication, a lot of what I resonated completely with what Todd was saying from a university perspective. It's not going to go away. In fact, when we go back to in person, we have so fewer no-shows to our Zoom appointments with students than we do regularly. So we need to continue to offer this as an option, both for our students and for our employers. And as Cindy shared, we'll figure this out together. Get these young people to the right seat at the right organization.
That's true. That's a great way to summarize it. I appreciate that. Yeah. And so certainly this is, again, thank you again for all this great content today and working through this session with us. Like a lot of our attendees on this session today, and I know others that are going to watch this recording, have lots of questions about what everybody's doing. So this is great content that hopefully everybody can figure out what should they keep doing, stop doing, and start doing, right? And now I feel like I'm going to have to go watch that Friends episode with Ross and the couch, right? Double pivot scenario. So, again, so I certainly appreciate your time and attendance today and taking time out of your busy day to work with us and hopefully get this information out to everybody. So hopefully you enjoy the rest of your week and stay safe, everybody. Appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.